Hi, I'm Bob Ethington.
And I'm Nick Nicholas.
And this is From Akron and Beyond. Well, hi there, folks. It is Bob and Nick with you again, and we have an interesting episode lined up for you guys this time. It's, I guess, the second in our series of getting to know the summit. How's that sound, Nick? We don't really have a name for this yet.
The individuals behind the mics, you know?
Exactly. It all kind of started with Brad Savage, who produces our show, and we kind of realized that we'd been doing a lot of work with him, but didn't really know that much about him. And there's another guy that we see here every week who is a main player here at the summit, and that is Chad Miller. Hi, Chad.
Hello, guys. This is pretty exciting. I'm honored to be on the podcast with you guys.
Well, and the whole idea, well, thanks. It's our pleasure.
Yeah.
And really our intent here, as mentioned beforehand, before we were on air, is just to ask the real hard-hitting questions of this Chad fellow, figure out exactly what his story is.
Investigative journalism happening right now.
Exactly. See if we can poke some holes in his background story. But no, anyway, it's fun though to as I just mentioned, kind of get to know these guys a little bit better and ask them the questions that kind of we have for a lot of the people that we have had on our show. So, Nick, do you want to get things started, or do you want me to?
Well, yeah, I'm just fascinated by how much the people that work here at the summit that I've gotten to know this last year or so, well, better than before, how much they love music. I mean, they live it. I mean, it's not just a job. I was just talking to Chad a few weeks ago. He just got back from Columbus. He went to see the Kills, one of my favorite bands.
That was a couple months ago.
He drove to Columbus to see the Kills. I mean, if I would have known, I would have followed you. You know, and I know that.
Never tell Nick where you're going.
Right, he'll follow me.
He likes to follow you. Yeah.
And I know that Bob, you've seen him at the Smile show.
Yeah, I've seen Bob at a couple shows. Most recently, Real Estate in Mahal's and Lakewood.
You were at that one too.
Yeah, and Bob, I saw you at that concert with the Smile, the Radiohead side project that was last July. Mm-hmm. I guess 2023. So yeah, I see you out and about every now and then, and I love that you get out and do this too. You know?
And you know too. It's just you guys really live the life, you know, the experience, and it's pretty cool.
It's genuine. I mean, You know, I mean, I started. I guess I've always been into music, I guess, and other things too. But that just comes from listening to the radio and being into listening to the radio and following all the current music that's out there. I listened to pop music as like a grade school kid, of course, like most do, and then sort of graduated to alternative rock. That was the whole first half of the 90s, 91 to 95. I was in high school, and then 95 to 2000, I was in college. And so alt rock, the 90s, that was high school and college for me.
Right.
And then in the 2000s, early 2000s, I discovered this radio station, The Summit, which I work at now, and that's when I discovered, I guess, the adult alternative music format that we play, and got into that, and just, sort of, I guess, processing it all and absorbing all of that by listening. And then, in the 2010s, I discovered the world of indie rock, and I'm really into that now. And so it goes. I mean, you're just following music and keeping up with it, and subscribing to music magazines like Rolling Stone and Spin and all the others, Paste Magazine, and just following it constantly and going to shows and all of it. I mean, it's not just a job, like you said. It's what I'd be doing anyway.
Yeah.
So
and it's helpful and part of the spirit of the summit to have people like Chad and Brad and all the guys who were, everyone, men and women that work at the station are also into music, and it's reflected in the playlist. You guys play such a wide range of music. But before we go any further into talking about how much we love you in the summer, let's go back in time here a little bit. So Are you from Akron?
I grew up in Navarre, Ohio, which is just south of Massillon. So yeah, the three little towns of Brewster, Navarre, and Beach City, Fairless School District. That's where I'm from originally.
Okay. And then, so that's where. I'm sorry, you kind of already answered the question. You went to school there and stuff. And then, what brought you to Akron ultimately?
Well, I mean, I actually live in Canton now.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, I mean,
did you go to school up here? Or did you
so I went to Kent State University for college. Again, 95 to 2000, and yeah, I mean, and then during college, my first job in radio, the summer of 1996, after my first year in college at Kent State, I got an internship at WRQK, Rock 107, the old Rock 107 there on Martindale Road, the Little Red House, as they called it. So I started there as an intern, summer of 96. And
what type of station was it?
So they were, at the time, a rock station, but they leaned a little, they were kind of all over the place back then, trying to be different things. Just a rock station, but they leaned a little alternative at night. They leaned trying to be more adult contemporary during the day, like WHBC. So it was a lot of different things, but it was a very popular station at the time. And I was an avid listener through high school when I discovered that station in spring of 1992. And it was very engaging at the time. Like radio was, even as far back then as the 90s. I mean, they were live on the air 24/7. They put callers on the air. They got a little goofy and silly at times, and I just listened all the time. I mean, I was just one that I didn't change the channel. I liked the music they were playing. It was current stuff, and some cool new stuff at the time that leaned alternative at night, and I was that guy. I was that guy who would call in the request line like, "Hey, will you play this song for me? But can you let me know about when you're going to play it, because I want to record it off my cassette player." I was that guy.
Right.
Sometimes they would get annoyed with me. Sometimes they'd just tell me, and then I knew, and then I would put it on my tape, and I had like an ongoing series of cassette tapes of current songs I'd like and all of that, and I'd sort of sometimes leave in the station IDs for a little flavor of that sort. I don't know. I did that a lot, and then. And I, call it enough. I got to befriend the evening DJ, Alfonso Riley, who still works in radio out in Colorado somewhere. Yes, he does. He was a mentor to me. And, I would just call in and, would request a song, but then we'd talk about other stuff like music or sports or whatever, and we just kind of talk for a little bit. I got to know him a little bit outside of the station too. We became sort of friends, and that's when I sort of asked him, I remember we went to a Pittsburgh Penguins hockey game. He was a big Penguins fan. Okay, and he's like, "Do you want to go?" I'm like, "Sure, yeah." And then around that time that was like towards the end of my first year in college, April of '96, and I asked him like, "You guys need help at the radio station, like an internship or something?" Like just sort of asking myself.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Yeah, I mean, just we could use the help." So he said, I don't know, like write up a little letter or something, and drop it off, or I'll drop it off to their program director at the time. And sure enough, I got an internship there. So, and I would go in, and that was just going in and learning by watching, the on-air studio and everything, and just trying to take in as much as I could. And it was I just tried to be there as much as I possibly could and learn by watching and doing. And just kind of hang out there, you know what I mean? And so after that was that internship was the whole summer of '96, and after that, then that Christmas break, and then the following school year at Kent State, my second year there, I remember I just happened to be there for whatever reason on a weekend in like very early March, and that evening guy Alfonso Riley was there, and
that's
just
a great name, by the way.
It is a great name. Super great guy, excellent on the air and everything. But yeah, I was just in there for whatever reason. I was talking to him, and I'm like, sort of like I posed the question a year before, like, "Hey, do you guys need interns?" He's like, knowing that they were sort of light on part-time DJs on the weekend. I'm like, so here, I noticed you guys don't have as many part-time DJs on the air like you used to. do you think there's a chance that I could do it? And he's like, well, Rick, the program director's in his office over there. Why don't you go in and ask him? And I'm like, ooh, okay, all right. So I don't know why he was in there on a weekend, but I went in there, and before I could get the question out of my mouth, he's like, you want to be on the air next Sunday? And I'm like, yeah.
It's like he read your mind.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm like, wow, I'm going to be on the air at this radio station I've been listening to religiously for 5 years. 5 years at the time.
Yeah.
Not long. And I'm still like 20 and a half years old. I'm just a college kid, towards the end of my second year. So the following Sunday, March 9th, 1997, I was live on the air for the first time.
Wow.
6 to midnight on a Sunday night. And that's pretty much was my part-time job during college. And that's what I would do. I would did every Sunday night, 6 p.m. to midnight. A lot of times I would do also Sunday morning, 5 a.m. to 9 a.m., but I'd also do whenever, like Saturday morning, 6 a.m. to noon, or even live overnights, Saturday or Sunday night. I just tried to get on there and be there as much as possible and just kind of get that practice in of being on the radio. And,
right.
And that's sort of how it all started.
Now, I'm assuming that your love of music came before your thinking about radio. A question we often ask our guest is if you can remember the first music that really hit you, the music that inspired you, maybe the first record you bought,
Well, I mean, like I said, I remember really getting turned on to listening to the radio. I guess it would have been in fourth grade. I don't know. I don't remember if it was some friends of mine or what. I think it was some friends of mine in grade school who, I don't know. They just talked about this, and I turned it on, and I had a radio in my bedroom at the time, and I just left it on that channel, Q92, the pop station at the time, WDJQ in Alliance. They were playing pop music at the time, and I just, sort of just stayed listening to that, and they're playing all those hit songs over and over again, and that's when I remember first listening to the radio. But before that, I remember, like older kids from school talking about songs, or music videos on. We didn't have cable where I lived. But we had Channel 23 and their music video show at night.
Oh, right.
Remember that?
I remember that. Yeah.
Well, I can't remember what that guy's name was. Billy D or something like that, maybe.
Sounds right.
Yeah. Anyways, I would catch a little bit of that, but it wasn't until I really started just, like I said, in fourth grade, listening to the radio, that Q92 when they were playing pop music back then. I just had it on constantly, and I just started absorbing it and recognizing, the newer songs that were played often, the hits, and why they were hits because they were being played so often. And, when you do that enough, it just sort of sticks in your brain.
Sure.
And I sort of grew out of that. But that's when I really started to catch on to like hit songs and songs that really, connected with me, I guess, at a super young age. There was a weird detour, though, during that time.
Yeah.
I remember it was right.
Now we're getting to the real dirt here.
Well, it's an odd detour. So keep in mind, that was in fourth grade. So then carrying into, still listening to this stuff, still listening to this pop radio station into fifth grade. And then I remember after fifth grade's over, starting summer vacation, June of 1988, my dad comes up and, right as I'm going to bed, he's like, hey, you should turn on the Cleveland Indians game. I'm like, okay, listen to that, So he changed it on my radio, and it was on AM 1100 WWWE.
Right, yeah.
And I'm listening to the Indians game at night. I'm like, okay. I never changed the channel. I just didn't change the channel. So in a weird thing, I just kept listening to News Talk Radio, WWWE, summer of 88, all through sixth grade, the 88-89 school year, and into that summer of 89. So, yeah, it sounds weird, but I don't know. It was different. And, they had the News Talk in the morning, whatever. But, when I would come home from school, they had this afternoon. It was sort of like a comedy talk show. Like if it were you two guys, but telling jokes the whole time, It was Bob Becker and Tom Bush on 3WE, and they just did like a comedy bit show throughout the afternoon, and they have like people call in, and the one guy did so many impressions, like impersonations of people. So many, and they were really good. Like the one bit that they would do all the time was "Make the president laugh," and he was doing a Ronald Reagan impersonation, and people would call in with jokes, and they just vote on the best one, and they give away a prize, whatever. After that, then they do the sports talk show, which I was into because I was getting into like Indians and Cavs and Browns and that sort of thing, and listen to Cavaliers games on the radio, Browns games on the week, whatever. So, yes, throughout the entirety of 6th grade. I was listening to news talk radio with sports games at night, whatever.
You were very well informed.
I guess. I don't know. I just didn't change the channel and got into that. And then in 7th grade, I really caught on to the fact that my mom and dad listened to oldies radio all the time. WMJI, Magic 105.7.
Sure, right.
When it was that golden oldies era, 1954 to 1970 music.
Right.
So I listened to that a lot in 7th grade because that's what they listened to. And then once I started 8th grade, then I'm like, why am I listening to this? Like, let's get back to normal music that people my age like.
Right.
So I started listening to pop radio, and again, this time it was WNPQ 95.9.
Okay.
And they're playing all the pop hits, and that was what all the kids, in my grade and 8th grade were talking about. And it was at this time that I got cable. We finally got cable the summer of 1990, so I'm watching MTV and soaking in that, which was a whole new world.
Yeah, sure.
And then, I discovered that station went off the air and became a religious channel, which still happens to this day, sadly. But that's when I discovered WRQK, spring of 92. Started listening to that nonstop, which, again, was what all the other kids went to anyway. And that's the station I ended up getting my first radio job at 5 years later.
Okay.
So there's my radio listening history as a kid.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, it is interesting. We found this with Brad as well. I may have a feeling we're going to find it with other people at work here, which is just that you have a deeply ingrained love of radio, right?
Yeah.
It's just a medium that hits you at an early age and has stuck with you.
Yeah, it's just like I said, listening to it as a kid and being fascinated by it and the theater of the mind that goes with that.
Right.
As a listener, we're very transparent here at this radio station. We meet a lot of our regulars. We invite them in and all that stuff. But, most people don't know what these folks look like, or what the inner workings of the on-air studio looks like. So you're painting that picture in your mind. And it can be fascinating at times if you allow yourself to get into that and just sort of use your imagination with it. That's sort of the beauty of it. And also just, I don't know. I mean, just the whole broadcasting aspect of it. I mean, the art of being on the air, talking and being a DJ. There's something to be said for that. And I just thought it was super cool. And the fact that these guys get to play music and talk on the radio every day, and now that's what I do for a living.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
So, you've been very general, though. So here comes the hard-hitting stuff.
Okay, all right.
We've been very general in terms of talking about the music. You kind of, pop music or, rock music, whatever. Who's the first band that blew you away? Like that you, I mean, do you recall your first album you bought or whatever?
Well, I don't know.
And it can be goofy.
Yeah,
it doesn't,
of course, yeah.
If I recall, Nick's is extremely goofy.
Jimmy Durante.
Yeah.
There you go.
Not really good.
Well, for me, I don't know. I mean, I had we all have favorite songs growing up.
Sure.
And I don't know. I don't recall any that, I don't know, way back then, I mean, just random pop songs here and there, but I will say the first record, in this case CD, that I ever got was the self-titled Metallica Black Album, Christmas Day, 1992.
Okay.
Which is just over 31 years ago.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And, it never really occurred to me to get into CDs or anything like that until... And that was when I was in high school. That was my sophomore year, Christmas 1992. And I remember just, during high school before that, being at my friend Chad's house. His name was Chad also.
Okay.
And they lived, up the road and everything. And I just remember being at their house, and their parents had a huge CD collection down in their basement. And I was fascinated by that. Wow. And looking back, it probably wasn't many, like a couple, 2 or maybe 3 CD towers.
Right.
But, as a young high school kid, you're looking at this like, whoa, I can't believe all this, you know? And it, some of it was cool music. Some of it like was country music I'm not into, but like just looking at this like, wow, this is quite a collection, and pulling stuff out like, wow, so this is what, and just checking out the CDs and everything. And that's what sort of inspired me to start building my own CD collection and collecting music in that way. So, So I got that first CD, Christmas 1992. But then by the spring of '93, still my sophomore year of high school, then I started looking into that, that Columbia House thing where you see in magazines and TV Guide back then, like buy 10 CDs for a penny, and you could add on like 6 more for like $10 or whatever.
Right.
So I'm like, I'm doing this, and I sent in the thing, filled out my sheet of what I wanted, and I got this box of like, I don't know, 12 or 13 CDs back in the mail. Like, this is the best ever. This is amazing, I got all this great CDs to listen to, and I did that a couple more times, and I slowly started building a CD collection throughout high school, which I took with me to college and all of that. So yeah, and that's how I started building a CD collection. But I guess, like, I don't know. I guess I just really identified with the coinciding with getting cable for the first time and being able to watch MTV. It sort of presented it in a different way. It's like listening to the radio, but on TV and seeing it with music videos, which was cool. I guess that being able to witness the pop culture part of it as a young kid in the early 90s, that was big too. And that sort of, opened my eyes to more music and they're reaching a younger audience. That's what they're going for. And, with that, just identifying more hits, I guess that's where, I guess the grunge rock explosion of Nirvana and Pearl Jam and that sort of thing, that's what grabbed me, I guess, most, because that was all that was being talked about in like 91 and 92.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I know you would have been the perfect age for that,
yes,
right? Yeah,
exactly, yeah. And, and again, I guess people of a certain age, like, Brad and I are the same age. I'm a few months older than him. But, people talk about generations, and like there's Gen X, there's millennials. Well, I've seen this thing many times online. It's sort of a meme, and it's the Xennials, which is sort of a subset of the combination of the two.
Right.
People born from 77 to 83, which was the time frame of the original Star Wars movies. And that goes, and the saying is, it's people who had an analog childhood but a digital adulthood.
Right.
And that perfectly describes me. Wow. So people of that little subset, they grew up, they coincided with the rise of grunge rock, alternative rock. It was a big cultural thing in the early 90s. That was when we were in high school. So that era, I think, is what really grabbed me. And
that was an exciting time for music, too.
Yeah, it absolutely was.
There were a lot of interesting bands.
Yeah. I don't know if I answered the question or not, but I don't know.
You came close. You came close.
Yeah.
Let's try this.
Okay. Okay.
Right this way.
Okay, so what's your first concert you went to?
The first concert I ever went to was in college, and I didn't go to concerts in college, but so I will say this too. My senior year, 94-95 school year at Fairless High School, and then my first year in college, 95-96 at Kent State, I was in a huge Led Zeppelin phase.
Okay.
Like, just discovering song after song. We starting to get to know the radio hits, but then I got this box set of the 4 albums, like the Crop Circle and the Wheat Field that came out. That was in 1990. Yeah. Everyone had that back then. Yeah. And it was 4 CDs, and then there was another smaller 2 CD set, which had everything else. So you had those 2 box sets. You had everything they ever did on 9 albums, but condensed into a box set.
Right.
And so I was listening to that constantly back then, and just sort of, not all the way through, but songs here and there and discovering other songs. Anyway, so it was that summer of 94 that Page and Plant reconvened for that unleaded thing.
Right.
With all the the Middle Eastern sounds and melodies,
kind of
and influences.
Stuff and all that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I was like, whoa, I can't believe they're doing this. This is the first time they've gotten back together. It was very, very well hyped.
Yeah.
And it was on MTV. I still recorded that. Not on MTV Unplugged, MTV Unleaded. Right. It's still on VHS somewhere, buried in my closet somewhere. But that was huge, and that sort of even raised my Led Zeppelin fandom even further at that time. And so anyways, I was obsessed with Led Zeppelin all during that time. And then they announced a tour. And that was the fall of '95. They played, it was at the time Gund Arena, now Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse.
Okay.
It was October of 1995. And I was like, wow, I can't believe this. I have to figure out a way to go to this. I'm a broke college kid with no car on campus at Kent State University.
Yeah.
How are we going to do this? I had some other high school friends who were at Kent State, and they got tickets, and they invited me along, and I was like, oh, man, I can't believe it. This is so exciting. My first concert, and that's a pretty cool first concert.
Oh, you're not kidding.
Yeah.
It's sort of an unofficial Led Zeppelin reunion,
Right.
Page and Plant.
Yeah.
No John Paul Jones, but definitely Jimmy Page and Robert Plant, and John Bonham's son was on drums.
I was going to guess
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And so it was amazing. I was losing my mind as a young, almost 19-year-old
Yeah.
at this concert in the upper reaches of Gund Arena in Cleveland, and they played all the hits, and it really was amazing. We are still, I mean, we're lucky that even happened, because they've
Right,
never even
right.
considered anything like that ever since, except for a
Right.
one-off show in London
Yeah.
at the O2, whatever.
Yeah.
So that was my first concert. And
Well, yeah, that's a good one.
It is a good
That's a
one.
really
Yeah.
good one.
But again, I didn't even think about that during high school, because in high school, I lived an hour away from Cleveland. I'm not going to be allowed to drive in a car. I wouldn't even have thought of doing that anyway. But that was that one in college, the beginning of college. And then all throughout college, I didn't go again until like a week before I graduated. The Smashing Pumpkins played at the Mack Center at Kent State, their
Okay.
college basketball gym, so I went to that.
Yeah.
And
Wow, that was a good one.
that was good. Still to this day, the shortest commute ever, like 5 minutes to the thing.
Right.
And then, I graduated college, and I'm like, I want to go to more concerts, And I'm like, I'm working in radio. I can make this happen.
I'm going
And-
back thinking there were some
And
really,
that's where it started, going to concerts for me back
Yeah.
then. Yeah.
there were some really good shows at that Kent State gym.
Yeah, I'll
You
bet
know?
there were. I
Remember
mean,
Dylan, and I saw Dylan there, Frank Zappa.
yeah. They don't really do that anymore,
Really?
though, there. But, yeah, that was one that I couldn't turn down,
Yeah.
Like, I'll figure out a way to go to that.
Yeah.
And I could. It was just around the corner. It was
Right.
easy. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, that it's funny about Led Zeppelin. They're sort of this eternal band, I had somebody mention this to me. This is going to be, I don't know, too self-referential for this interview, but I'm going to tell a story anyway, which is that, because it all kind of ties in oddly. I used to be on the radio once a week on WAKR.
Okay.
Just as a guest with Ray Horner, who was their morning guy. And at that time, I was had gotten to know Chuck Klosterman, who's
I
now
love him, yeah.
who's now gone on to become a very well known writer nationally. But at the time,
I've
was
never
writing,
met him.
Yes,
But I'm a big fan of his writing. I know he worked at the Akron Beacon Journal for a little
Right,
while. Great articles in Spin Magazine, and I
Yes.
have a lot of his books too.
Yeah, there
Yep.
you go. Okay, so he was working for the Beacon Journal, as mentioned, and I'd gotten to know him. He actually came to the library to write a story about why would anyone rent videos when the library has this huge collection of movies.
Sounds like something he would write.
Right, yeah. And so we got to be friends and we remain friends to this day. But anyway, he had, I think it was his first book, Fargo Rock City, was coming out.
Yes.
And so I got him to come into WAKR to talk about the book. It's kind of funny in retrospect,
It
just
is.
because it's not the venue he would normally probably be on. But he came in and we were in and did an interview with Ray. And when we were going in at the Akron Radio Center, as they call it there, there's 3 different studios.
Yeah.
And one's for WAKR, and then I don't remember the call numbers, but one's their FM station that plays rock, and the other one's a country station. So in the one station, it was there was no one in there at the moment, but there was this guy there who was in there who looked to me like he was probably about 20, 21, maybe a young Chad, an intern.
Yeah.
And he had, but this guy had like real long hair, and he was wearing a Zeppelin shirt, a Zozo t-shirt.
Yeah.
And when I saw him, I said to Chuck, I said, I think I went to high school with that guy, which was a joke because obviously I was like 20 years older than this guy.
Yeah.
But it's like that kid still exists, right? I mean, today you can find the kid with the long hair and the Zeppelin T-shirt,
or the Pink Floyd T-shirt, or all these old, classic rock bands from the 70s. Kiss T-shirt.
They're all at Target.
Well, now it's Nirvana shirts.
Yes.
I guess,
well,
right. Yeah.
Brad and I talk about that often where, like I'm 47 years old now, and for these 19-year-old kids, Nirvana is classic rock, as I use the finger air quotes here.
I was thinking about that as you were talking about the genres.
How many years ago?
Yeah, because I guess of the dreaded size of the baby boomer generation in terms of pure numbers.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to always say that, there's not a bar in America that you can go into that you won't hear Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Or that you haven't been to, Bob.
Well, and it has been proven that Creedence has played at everyone. Yeah. But the point is that that's got to go away at some point, doesn't it?
I think about that a lot, actually. Like, at what point, I mean, people are allowed to like what they like, but for me, I used to work at Rock 107 in Canton, and they were a mainstream rock station, and that was what was played all the time. I was on the air at Rock 107, like I said, March of 97 to February of 2011. So do the math. That is 14 years of hearing that.
Yeah.
And some of those songs were being played like they're brand new, and some of them are older than I am. And I'm 47 years old.
Yeah.
And credit to the longevity.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, there was a lot of great music from that era.
There was.
But
there's more than just those handful of albums.
Right.
Or artists.
Yeah. Well, yes. Well, that's a whole nother story.
Right.
This is From Akron and Beyond. I am Bob Ethington with my co-host Nick Nicholas, and we are talking to the Summit's own Chad Miller. Hi, Chad, again.
Hello. Honored to be here.
The only Led Zeppelin story I have is I got to see them at public hall.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, a couple of weeks before Led Zeppelin 2 came out.
Wow.
Oh, okay.
So that was my experience.
That's your Zeppelin story.
Yeah. But Grand Funk opened.
Wow, that's a lot of heaviosity going on there. So you end up in radio, and it seems like a perfect job for you. The way as you've been describing this, it almost seems like you were just born for it.
Yes, yes, and I mean, this place specifically here at the Summit FM is where I wanted to be for so long. Because working, I loved all the stops that I've had.
Yeah,
loved them. Very, very grateful. And like I said, I worked on the air at Rock 107. In Canton in various ownership iterations and locations, physical locations, from, like I said, March of 97 to February of 2011. And, it's a rock station. You're going to play rock music. That's great, and I get into it, of course. It's the new music especially. I've always been into the new music. But, after a while, you just get tired of hearing old Aerosmith and Van Halen and AC/DC songs all the time. I'm like, I can't take it anymore.
Right.
So me being who I am and following music constantly, I've always been one to always drawn to what's just around the corner as far as new music that's coming or under the radar stuff, stuff that doesn't get played on the air. So that's where I, And as a fan, as a listener, I would listen to the alternative rock stations at the moment. I was a big listener of 100.7 WMMS The Buzzard.
Sure.
Summer of 95 until they switched formats February of 97. They were a terrific alternative rock station. Fantastic. And John Gorman, the great John Gorman, radio consultant and sort of led the way for the Buzzard in the 70s and 80s. Yeah. He sort of plucked air talent from Rock 107 in the early 90s to go up there. Yes, he did. Yeah. And so that was also comfortable for me because I already knew these on-air folks, and they were playing the cool alternative rock at the time. And it's geared towards young kids anyway. I was, 19, just starting college, and I was listening to WMMS as a fan when they were an alternative station, all through my first and second year of college, 95, 96, 96, 97, they stopped being an alternative station February of 97 and just switched like that to being just a straight-ahead rock station. And it was crushed, you know?
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing. Listeners don't see that coming.
Right.
And they're like, whoa, what is happening here, you know? Mm-hmm. And I was devastated, you know? Like, what am I going to listen to now?
Radio's infamous for that, for just changing formats on
it
that
happens,
dime.
right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Well, back then especially. So then I found 107.9 The End, the other alternative station in Cleveland.
Right.
Listened to that from February 97 until May of 1999, when it also went and changed formats.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, just getting in the culture of alternative rock, and then a couple years later, I think it was like 2002, I finally discovered this station, which was different than alternative.
Yeah.
Leaned adult alternative.
Right.
Older artists and titles and things like that weren't going to be always played on alt rock stations. And I really dug deep into this station as a listener from, like I said, 2002 until, just the whole time until I started here. And it started for me here.
When did you start here?
Well, I was going to say, I started as a volunteer summer of 2011. So I was let go from the Clear Channel version of Rock 107 President's Day 2011.
Okay.
And I was crushed. I was devastated. But, you know, and the corporate nature of that and the music didn't come first there necessarily, you know. And I was very disappointed and bummed out and depressed about it. But after a while, it was kind of freeing, you know, because that's when I found the Summit and decided that, Garrett Hart, who recently retired from here, he had just started as a volunteer at the Summit that summer of 2011. As he was getting started with building the Rock and Recovery program that aired here for so long. And he brought me along to kind of help him, gather songs and, do some audio editing of certain bits and that sort of thing.
Right.
And that was my entry into here at the Summit at the old location in the Op building. And just to meet everyone and be around everyone and be seen. Yeah. And so then Garrett kindly recommended to program director at the time, Bill Gruber, that you should put him on the air, And I did. And I did a weekend shift every weekend from beginning of 2012, January 2012 to January of 2016 when I finally got hired here.
Really?
So 4.5 years of volunteering, but 4 of those years just doing an on-air shift on the weekend, just to keep my foot in the door, be seen, patiently wait. I was working another different job at the time, but that was me patiently waiting for 4 years by volunteering here, doing a weekend on-air shift until I got finally hired, and I did. Right. So I've been here officially as hired as music director since January 2016.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. A lot of patience.
Yeah.
But it was because this is where I wanted to be.
Right.
Realizing that we are a non-commercial public radio station. It's the adult alternative music format, which itself lends itself to the most variety of music being played. And being a non-commercial public radio station, that gives us the freedom to do all these things, to be able to do what you're doing on this radio station, this podcast show, take chances, do different things, be whatever we want to be, and just as long as it's good content. And so the wide variety of music is why I wanted to be here, and the freedom to say, play, and do what we want. And with that, all the great under-the-radar music we play, that's what I wanted to be a part of, because no other station will play this kind of music.
It was interesting. You mentioned that channel that was the alternative channel in Cleveland after MMS was there just for a couple years. What was that again? That was
107.9. They were an alternative station that started in, I think, 1990. With that bit where they played "It's the End of the World as We Know It" by R.E.M. on a loop for 24 hours.
Their last day, right?
That was their first day.
Okay, but then they played it at the end. They played it at the end, too.
I'm sure they did. That last week was sort of just play whatever the heck you want, and they probably ended with that, too.
I love that channel, except we were talking earlier about, all the bands that they played on classic radio that, nonstop you got to stick up. The only negative thing I have to say about that Cleveland channel, that you heard Cannonball 10 times a day.
Well, the Breeders, that was a big hit.
But I mean, other than that, it was great.
I didn't see it that way. I loved that song back when I was in high school. And
I didn't see that story coming either. I didn't know.
I had to put that in there because those are the alternative version.
Don't bring up the Breeders around Nick Nicholas.
No, they're a great band. I mean, the Gordon sisters.
That song Cannonball, that was enormous, the 92-93 school year. Brad and I were sophomores in high schools, living in far different places around the country, but that was a a touchstone, beloved album moment. Sorry, Nick. For our generation, for sure.
It's been really fun listening to you talking about your relationship with radio. I couldn't help it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a generational thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think it would, for like, of my age group, Nick tell me if this rings a bell to you at all. But I mean, to me, it was like when I was in grade school, I was listening to to AM radio.
Yeah.
And I remember I'd go every week to the mall, and there was a store there that had the top 20 singles, right?
Yeah.
And I would get that piece of paper and take it, I'd look at it and figure out what songs I liked and didn't like, because I listened to it all the time.
Yeah.
And then there was like this big shift somewhere when I was in 6th grade, roughly, where some older kids turned me on to the FM, at that time, underground rock.
Right.
Which, I mean, really the Summit is about the closest thing to those kind of stations that we have, because the kind of programming you do, you never really know what you're going to hear. It could be an old song, it can be a brand new song, it can be...
And it can be new to you however you come to it.
Sure, exactly, which is a beautiful thing.
Whether it is recent or long ago.
Sure, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what's exciting about it.
Right.
And in this case, it was kind of the same thing. You never knew what these guys were going to play.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this on previous episodes, but I in particular feel spoiled that I had access to like radio, like in the Detroit area at that age, when I was that age, that was so freeform radio. You never knew what they were going to play.
But we had MMS at the time, which was exactly the same.
Yeah.
You know, all night.
Yeah.
There's some similarities to that here. I mean, we are a little bit structured with our format and the currents and the older songs, but I mean, still
compared to other stations,
the variety,
yeah.
the breadth of scope and the variety is vast compared to anyone else.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
it was like Joey Ramone listening to the Transistor Under the Covers, and then and then later on it was MMS. I mean, everything from Captain Beefheart to Gabor Szabo. You know, I mean,
See, by the time I moved to this area, MMS was still good, I guess, but they were not like that anymore. No.
Well, it's funny you mentioned going into a record store and finding the top 20 singles list. That's another thing, too, for me that I've always loved, and that is following the music charts. What are the top played songs, whether it's in the country, the old school Casey Kasem Top 40 radio show.
Right.
But also, when I started working in radio, I would see the weekly charts for what the radio station played. Like their top charts that were played for the week, and that was always fascinating to me because I knew that all the radio stations submitted that to the reporting services like Billboard, and collectively around the country, that's how you get the top 40 stations in America.
Yeah.
So everyone contributes, and that sort of clicked with me, and it was fascinating because that's where it comes from. And then so what I've done. Like literally every week, dating back to my early days at the old Rock 107, they had all those weekly charts of what the radio station played each week, and I have copies of them because it's cool to just look back and see what was played. It's a time capsule and a pop culture time capsule, no less, and just see what was played in any given week, and you'll see all the hits you remember on top, but you dig down a little bit further and like, ooh, I don't remember that song, and you might pull it up and listen to it like, oh my God, that's what that was. I almost forgot about that, It's just interesting to keep that and look back.
Sure.
Something interesting. I was talking to someone at a record store a few months ago. When I was in high school, there was a magazine called Go Magazine that was sponsored by local radio stations. I think it was maybe one, it expired with one and another one took it over.
Yeah.
But it was free, and you get it at the record stores.
Yeah.
It had the charts from all over the world.
Yeah.
And I always wondered what
other stations were playing.
What Whiter Shade of Pale was, and what The Wind Cries Mary, because you couldn't hear them anywhere, but I would read about them.
Right.
The Who, and it was just amazing that something like that existed back then.
Well, and by the time I started working in radio, we got all the trade publications, and they'd have the charts from all the other radio stations, and that's a big part of what I do every single day here at the station too, is just kind of look at what the other similar radio stations to ours are playing.
Yeah.
Because they're playing a lot of what we do, but then they're playing some different things.
Sure.
And I'm like, oh, maybe we should start playing that because they are. And, and all of these radio stations are each their own personality, and it's a reflection of that. So, and with our adult alternative music format having so much variety and scope fitting under one big umbrella compared to the more refined and tightened, genres out there on the radio, it's just fascinating to see, again, in our world of adult alternative radio, what other stations are doing. A lot of it's the same, a lot of it's different, and a lot of it, we're playing some that they're not, we're not playing some that they are, and it's just really interesting to see the variations around the country of our similar non-com AAA radio stations.
And of course, you guys, sorry, Nick, but I was just going to say that at the Summit, you guys play a lot of local music.
And that too.
That's
another thing.
Right.
And that adds our own flavor around in our area as well. You should always aim to serve your community.
Big time.
Yeah. And other stations like ours do a lot of that too. We're just very lucky to have such a wealth of variety to choose from as far as our local music scenes go here too.
WMMS used to have the coffee break concert.
Yep.
But you guys are like nonstop with the local stuff.
Right. Yeah.
I do wonder sometimes. There's really no way to quantify this, I guess, but it does seem to me, as objective as I can be about it, which is not very objective. It does seem to me that Northeast Ohio has produced a lot of interesting music, and continues to.
Yeah.
I mean, I know so many young musicians that are so creative and talented that live in Akron and around here.
Right.
And I guess what I'm getting at is sometimes I wonder, like, do people feel that way everywhere? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of cities that do. I'm sure Chicago is.
I'm sure it's like that everywhere, but we have like the support of the media here.
Yeah,
I don't think it's like that other places.
I wonder that too a lot. I mean, the generations. There's a lot of young, great musicians out there, but
everywhere.
You guys, the Bizarros and Tin Huey and all the things that you've been a part of, Bob. I mean, the generations, like even the Numbers Band and Harvey Gold, the projects he's been in.
Yeah.
In addition to the younger folks coming up and people my age in their mid 40s. I mean, there's. We have the Akron music scene, we have the Youngstown music scene, and we have all points in between, like Canton and Kent and Cleveland, of course. It's the quality here and the depth is just astounding as far as local music goes.
Well, because not all by any means, but a lot of the musicians that are younger that I'm kind of thinking of, they're the sons and daughters of some of these people that were in these bands before, so there's, I guess there's a nepotism there, but what there also is, they grew up listening to some of this weird stuff, so it's normal to them.
Or just kept in the lifestyle, and they just like, I want to do this too,
Or fans just like myself, I didn't have any relatives that were in the music business, but just the exposure that we're all lucky to, we're exposed to all this great stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I wonder about that sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, so we begin this conversation, and we're beginning to run out of time here. So we begin this conversation talking about how many shows you go to.
Yeah, I see.
Frankly, I find amazing. I really do. Like you mentioned that we've crossed paths. I guarantee that Chad has been at like 250 shows for every one I've gone to.
Yeah.
It would be natural.
I wouldn't go that far.
It would be. Of course, you see me.
Yeah.
But what would you say have been? Well, when you go to that many concerts, I would think that it might almost be like more of a struggle for some of them to stick out as being like, wow, that blew my mind. Have there been a couple shows in the recent years that you just are like, man,
absolutely.
I'm so glad I was there.
Absolutely. I mean, I have my favorites that I go see often.
Yeah.
Even though I've seen them before. I'm like, I will never not see this band perform live again. And the thing too is like, I went to a lot of concerts before I started here at the Summit. But,
sure.
And it used to be back then me asking the program director or the music director, like, hey, sheepishly, hey, could you I get on the guest list for the show if I ask really nicely? Like, okay, I'll put in an email. Now I'm that guy. I can just do that, and it's fair to say that the radio promoters, the record labels, they know that I enjoy live music, and they want us radio folks, us programmers, to go to these things to see and experience their band that they are working to radio and trying to get exposure. Yeah. So they'll always offer that, and I love just going to shows, so I'll take advantage of that. And
you bring it to the job, because I've heard you many times on air talking about a show you saw, and then you play a song from the band. Yeah.
Well, I would say too, I was always taught from, again, my radio mentor, Alfonso Riley, from back in the day. He always said, this, and it's very true. The number one thing you should always do when you're on the air is sell the music and sell the station. Just make it sound important, and that's what you're doing, selling the music and selling the station. Yeah. And so, I tell people this all the time too. We throw so much new music at people that it's important to give it some context, like, hey, they're playing here soon. They got an album coming out soon, but also an analogy or a comparison to someone's sound,
Right.
Like, man, saw these guys, or I love this band. If you like so-and-so, you'll like them. They sound like so-and-so, or they're going to be on a late night talk show. Be sure you check them out there. Set the DVR, whatever. Yeah. Anything I can do. Anything that might be newsworthy, a little tidbit that they've got that's out there right now. Anything like that, I can just slip in, when describing them coming out of a song or going into a song. That's so important. Yeah. Because, again, we throw so much new music at people. I'm immersed into that culture. I know, I get it, but most people aren't. Right. And maybe they're just paying attention while listening. So getting that out there is so critical to just give them a frame of reference. Sure. Yeah. And so, yes, if I'm at a show, I'll briefly say, oh, man, this band rocked my face off last night, or something like that. And sometimes, it sort of blends into the job. Like, we'll do a sound check meet and greet on site with our members of the radio station and just stay for the show. Yeah. Right. Sometimes I want to go because it's a band that I like that we might not even play here, but I just like. Yeah. And sometimes it's my favorite band, so I will see over and over and over again. And like my favorites, like bands like, Pearl Jam is my favorite band. Seeing them live, especially long ago, was just an epic experience. You feel like you're part of something every single night. You get a different set list every night. You don't know what you're going to get. Right. That togetherness that you feel every single time there. But, newer favorites like My Morning Jacket, they put on a killer live show. Yeah. Guitar rock at its peak. But other, like Krungbin, they're going to be coming to the area soon on a tour, and just the ultimate groove just the live show, the stage presence, and it's just a low-key groove of music they play, but man, is it entertaining. Okay. And it's something you feel. So,
I've never even heard of them.
Yeah, start listening. Bob, you're familiar with them, right?
I am, yes. Yeah.
So, yeah, these are the things. That
was a good description.
Be entertained for the evening. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
And again, find a way to relate that to the listener on the air, right, of why you're listening to all this great music in the first place, and why we're bringing it to you. Here's what it is. Here's what it's all about. This is who these musicians are.
What band would you say? Pearl Jam's the band you've seen the most?
I've seen them 22 times.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Starting in 24 years ago, yeah. So, and they're getting older. They don't tour as much anymore. Yeah, yeah. But I remember the summer of 2003, I saw them 6 times that summer.
Wow, okay.
You sound like a deadhead,
Well, there's actually that band is cultivated amongst their fans.
I've seen them 32 times. Yeah. 62.
And trust me, that pales in comparison to other maniacs out there in the world who are in the hundreds, know.
But Pearl Jam, they're not musically like the Dead at all. But there is a similarity.
But they've cultivated
all
a
those
community
bootlegs
and a
that come out and stuff. Right. Which is very Dead-like. Yeah,
right.
Nick, what band have you seen the most? I don't say the Bizarros.
I think Robin Hitchcock, the Kinks.
Wow. I never saw the Kinks. I'd love to have been able to see them.
Well, and going back to my
Pink Floyd.
Okay.
Going back to my favorites, like I've seen My Morning Jacket maybe 17 times. Yeah. Wilco 12 to 15 times. I don't know. I have it all written down somewhere at home, but I'd have to check the numbers. But those are just a couple examples that come to mind of my favorites that I see often,
It's funny.
Going back years.
It's funny you mentioned that about going back and checking, because I
keep track of all this
I have
stuff.
a couple.
I used to.
Yeah, I wish I did. And back in the days when you actually had tickets, which is rare now, but why didn't I keep those tickets?
I had the
went at
presence
so
of
many
mind
cool
to
shows.
write all this down from the beginning.
Yeah, yeah. And I have a really one good friend who just has like a encyclopedic memory. I mean, he'll be
people say that all the time about me.
Yeah, well, maybe you're one of these kind of people where it's like, oh yeah, that was March 7th, 1976 or whatever. I'm like, how do you remember that?
He remembered all these dates of his career.
Well,
tonight.
yeah.
It's a frame of reference. I'm just used to that, to provide added context. But no, I mean, like, I
I'm just
remember all
laughing
these dates
Nick
because
can't remember my name, and so you're not a good example against
Mr.
Chad
Effington.
I remember all this stuff because I write it all down, I guess.
Yeah,
and I go back to it and I look at it, and it's sort of, and also because
cool.
these are events, these are big moments. I don't know. I mean, that's just how I've been. I mean, there are certain things that I sort of forget. Like, I don't remember what I had for dinner last night.
Yeah, right.
But, or, maybe a show from forever ago.
Yeah.
And I'm also that guy that gets the set list from the stage. So I keep all of those.
I've noticed that.
Yes.
Yeah,
and write the date down on that on a photocopy. And that's another way to remember it too.
Yeah.
Because again, you go to a show and like, I don't know, I saw so-and-so in 2006. Great concert. I barely remember it now, because it's so long ago. But you have the set list, and like, oh, that's what they played,
right?
And that's the lasting memory. And I collect the concert posters for that reason too. That's you put on the wall, and you can point to that and be like, let me tell you about that night right there. That is a moment in time, and celebrating that with cool pop art. So that's the culture of going to concerts. I'm not the only one. People get into buying the T-shirt, collecting the concert posters, going for a set list, just making it an event that it is.
Well, now that's a huge part of it, supporting the band,
right?
So the artists too, because
people don't buy the CDs
they're
or
not making
necessarily
money.
LPs. They got to go out and make money touring. That's how they make their money. So
right, exactly. I guess no one asked me, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I guess that.
Well, go ahead.
I guess I'm trying to think who I've seen the most.
Dylan,
and probably Bob Dylan. Well, no, or Guided by Voices.
Oh, that's
right.
Yeah, I've seen them like
spank it.
I can't tell you how many times. I know I've seen them probably 25 times.
Wow.
But.
See, you beat me in that regard.
Yeah, and Dylan.
Wait, Guided by Voices 25 times?
Yes.
Okay.
Dylan would be, I think I've seen him about 15, 16, something like that. Wilco I've seen numerous times as well.
You know what? I will say this. Robert Pollard, solo, opened for Pearl Jam in Cincinnati in 2006. I saw them there.
Yes.
So I've sort of seen Guided by Voices.
That was with that brief period where he was being a solo artist.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
I saw him on that tour, but not with Pearl Jam.
Yeah.
But anyway, enough about me. This has been about Chad Miller today, and we are out of time. I'm sorry to end it on me. We might edit that out.
Thank you.
But thank you, Chad, and it's been very informative and fun.
Yeah,
and,
I
hope
really
you
enjoyed talking to you guys and just kind of going through and nerding out about radio and then music and concerts in general.
Yeah, and it's just I think it's an interesting. I hope it's interesting for the listeners out there to, learn a little bit about the background of the people that they listen to so often on the Summit. So,
I will say this too, for someone who so often, all the time, interviews these actual artists when they come here for Studio C sessions or phone interviews, Zoom interviews. It's nice to have the questions being asked to me. Being on the opposite end of that. This is really cool. Great. Seriously, guys, I really enjoyed this. You guys do a great job at this podcast, peeling back layers for all sorts of people in Akron and music and the city and everything. So, again, it's really been an honor to be with you guys today. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thanks, Chad. Our pleasure. So this has been From Akron and Beyond. I'm Bob Ethington with my co-host, Nick Nicholas, and our guest, Chad Miller. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.